Welcome, my loves, to MagneticYou, where science becomes strategy and frequency takes form. We have graced the courts of the Queen with our presence and the battlefield of the night with our bravery. Now, our path winds to the high tower of the mind, to the realm of the overachiever, the overqualified, ever questioning keeper of knowledge, the tireless stacker of degrees and dawnless nights. Here, among the scrolls and sleepless lamps, we meet the grand Vizier, the mind behind the crown, and the heart that forgot to rest. The candle is waning, the ink still wet. So take a breath, my love, because this is the grand Vizier, tale of 1,000 lamps, overachieving, and the science of knowing when you are enough. Once upon a hush before dawn, there lived a woman whose mind burned brighter than the throne. They called her the Grand Vizier, keeper of order, mistress of intellect, the mind behind the crown. Each night, long after the palace slept, she walked the marble corridors of the royal library, rows upon rows of golden lamps, each one a symbol of her promise to protect the light of wisdom. The glow adored her, and yet devoured her. And the library never stopped growing. For every lamp she lit, two more appeared. With each new dawn, she grew more exhausted. The safety of the realm, she thought, depended upon her vigilance without end. For if ever a single flame should die, the whole kingdom, she was certain, would descend into darkness. So she studied, scribed, and sacrificed sleep to ensure no light would fade or forget. And though her body begged for rest, the thought of stillness felt dangerous, a betrayal of duty, a silence too loud. The light was her proof, and so she stayed among the flames, never noticing that the same fire that she tended was quietly consuming her within. But there was a time when the palace was not so frenzied and sleepless, when ideas had beginnings and endings, and when the days knew when to work and when to rest. Even the Grand Vizier, wrapped in her endless scrolls of knowledge, would close her quill and let the ink dry beneath the moon. In those days, achievement was a song that rested between the notes. The mind's chemistry shimmered like candlelight, bright enough to guide, never fierce enough to scorch. The prefrontal cortex, the Vizier's throne of thought, guided the kingdom through strategy and stillness alike. To envision, to focus, then to rest. It was the tactician and the poet, both, commanding when needed, listening when not. The amygdala watched faithfully from its tower, ringing its bell only when real danger approached. The alarm rose and fell in balance. A guardian's warning, brief, protective, wise. The limbic scribes worked quietly in the library's heart, recording the emotions of the day, cataloging joy, loss, and meaning in equal measure. Their ink was steady, their archives whole. The dopamine couriers, swift and tireless, carried scrolls of encouragement across the marble halls. They were heralds of anticipation, their joy not in arrival, but in the journey itself. When each duty was complete, they returned to rest. The hippocampus, that gentle archivist of memory, bound every victory and lesson into story. Her shelves held both triumph and reprieve, ensuring the Grand Vizier would remember not just the striving, but the satisfaction that followed. And through it all flowed the Vegas River, the cool, unhurried current beneath the city walls. Its waters carried the breath of calm, slowing the heart, deepening the inhale, reminding the kingdom that peace, in safety, and success are indeed hand in hand. This was the physiology of harmony, a nervous system in concert, a mind that pursued, completed, and restored. The lamps glowed in rhythm with the stars, and the kingdom shone, not from effort, but coherence. But peace is a shy creature, easily startled by praise, and as her wisdom grew, so did expectation. The crown began to whisper, "Your light keeps the kingdom safe. Let it never go out." And so, out of devotion and fear, the Grand Vizier made a vow. The lamps shall burn forever. At first, it seemed noble, a mind forever alert, forever luminous. But the body, that patient kingdom of cells and sinew, was never built for unending daylight. What began as brilliance became imbalance. When knowledge began to outshine wisdom. For, you see, the overachiever's brain isn't broken. It's just overtrained. The prefrontal cortex, meant for strategy and stillness, slipped into obsession, issuing orders without reprieve long after the work was already done. Tension intercepting the body's messages for need and nurture. Its walls thickened with thought, crowding out intuition until she stood, locked, outside. The amygdala's alarm, once the ringer of true danger, knew no rest. The sleepless sentinel, vision strained and blurry, deemed every rustle as danger and every hush as scheme. The limbic scribes blurred the lines between memory and fear. Harried by the onslaught of warnings, etched anxiety as achievement and marked risk for rest. The dopamine couriers, once heralds of purpose, became restless, racing in circles through the corridors of thought, demanding more lamps, more scrolls, more proof, all for less flame, until brilliance itself began to dim. No spark allowed the mercy of satisfaction. The hippocampus, once the faithful binder of victories, could no longer archive joy. Each triumph faded before it found the page, leaving only the litany of vigilance behind. No matter how much the Vizier achieved, she remembered only that she was never done. And the Vegas River, once steady and sure, receded from exhaustion. Without its current, the Grand Vizier's breath shallowed, her pulse raced towards a finish line that never arrived. Calm felt unsafe, quiet, accusatory. The kingdom stayed bright, but remained brittle, its air heavy and stifling, its peace forgotten. Every lamp still burned, yet none gave warmth. For it was no longer ambition that drove the Grand Vizier. It was the fear of stopping. Every time the Grand Vizier finished a task, she lit another lamp. For the overachiever, completion is never complete. The ink barely dries before the next scroll is unrolled. You finish one chapter and your hand is already reaching for the next. But the body is no endless flame. It needs the coolness of pause. Even when the task ends, an email, a conversation, a project, dopamine still runs with anticipation. Cortisol still hums for concentration. Adrenaline still drives for one more thing. Without a cue to stand down, these forces keep moving, like candle smoke, spiraling long after the flame is gone. That's why the mind replays the day, even in the dark. Why the heart keeps working when the work is done. The body never got the message that it had already arrived. So begin by closing each task with the scholar's pause, a gesture that lets the body learn what the mind already knew. One deliberate minute. Roll your shoulders back as if shelving the weight of a well-read tome. Exhale 3 times, each breath a quiet decree, returning peace to your kingdom. Soften your eyes to the edges of the room, beyond the lamp, beyond the page, teaching your vision to widen again after focus. In 60 seconds, the body shifts from sympathetic pursuit to parasympathetic presence. Cortisol recedes. The vagus nerve, that quiet river of safety, begins to flow again. And the mind finally receives the message. We did it. Think of it like letting the ink dry before closing the book. Without it, every page smudges into the next. The truth is, the brain learns rest only through the body. We cannot command calm with thought. We must teach the body what peace feels like. Completion is not when the work stops. It is when the body believes it has. She once believed her worth lived in the glow of her lamps. Each new flame, each task completed, each paper signed, proved her purpose. But when the lamps dimmed, so did she. When the flame faltered, so did her existence. That illusion lives in the prefrontal cortex, where the brain links identity to achievement. Over time, it mistakes output for existence. Each success signal, I achieved, therefore I am. But when the lamps rest, the mind scrambles for another flame. When the work slows, the self feels gone. But identity built on illumination alone forgets that light comes from within. The self ledger dissolves this illusion by asking, who remains when the lamps are low? Who stands in the library when the work is done? Write 3 truths that do not flicker with performance, such as, I am perceptive. I am generous with thought. I am capable of calm. Each phrase rewires neural networks. Dopamine's drive quiets. Serotonin's calm takes its place. The brain begins to recognize being as enough. The overachiever's brain isn't addicted to success. It's addicted to anticipation. Every new idea, each unopened scroll, floods the mind with dopamine, that shimmering promise that the next pursuit will bring satisfaction. But if completion is never acknowledged, that promise becomes perpetual. Dopamine is not the chemistry of success. It is the chemistry of almost. And when almost never closes, it becomes hunger, a trap of craving when the chase has ended, of pursuit, even when there's nothing left to prove. The corridor connection teaches your mind what arrival feels like. Blow out the lamp when the project ends, literally or figuratively. A small exhale to mark a chapter closed. Step into the courtyard, a fresh air between tasks, letting the silence remind you that the world still moves without management. Play the same quiet melody each time you complete something meaningful, linking joy not to continuation, but to closure. Each of these acts is a rewiring of expectation, and over time, your body learns to celebrate closure. The restlessness softens. Dopamine no longer demands the chase. The reward networks begin to settle into satisfaction. We break the loop by guiding the current back home. Each of these practices, the scholar's pause, the self-ledger, the corridor connection, restores a different strand of the overachiever's circuitry, body, belief, and behavior. Together, they turn doing into natural rhythm and achievement into awareness. On the night that dared to dim, the kingdom held its breath. A wandering wind slipped through the open arches, soft as breath, bold as fate, and blew out a single lamp. The Grand Vizier startled, for no flame had ever faltered in her care. She hurried forward, robes trailing like smoke, but the faster she moved, the wilder the air became. Her running breath further stirred the storm. Each step, each gasp blew yet another candle to sleep. By the time she reached the final aisle, the last lamp flickered, bowed, and went dark. Silence filled the chamber. The Grand Vizier sank to the marble, palms on cold stone, shutting her eyes to the stillness that threatened to drown her. When she opened her eyes again, the high windows met her gaze, and through them, the moon entered, silver and slow, washing over the extinguished lamps until they gleamed like glass pearls. The air cooled, the marble softened, and in that stillness, she heard something for the first time in a long time. Her heart beat. That night has passed, but the Grand Vizier's lessons remain. That stillness is not the end of thought, but the beginning of understanding. That knowledge without rhythm burns, and rhythm without pause fades. That enough is not the absence of ambition. It is the dance of effort with ease. That the kingdom never needed your sleeplessness, but instead your presence. They say the Grand Vizier still walks the corridors she once commanded, between mind and moonlight. The library glowing without burning, not because the lamps are lit, but because she finally is. If something in you stirred as the lamps went dark, if some quiet certainty rose when the light no longer had to prove itself, that is your beginning. The Grand Vizier lives on in every woman who has built her peace on performance, who has mistaken rest for regression and brilliance for belonging. But the truth she leaves us is simpler than all her scrolls combined. You were never meant to earn your worth. You are meant to remember it. In coaching, we enter that remembering together. We study the nervous system that mistook movement for meaning. And we teach the mind that ran the kingdom how to finally live in it. We practice reflection instead of reaction, being instead of proving. Here, your ambition is not asked to vanish. It is asked to breathe, to find its natural pulse between expansion and exhale, to lead not from the fervor of effort, but from the fluency of ease. This is not the ending. It is the return to coherence, to clarity, to calm command, to the woman who no longer guards the light, but embodies it. Your next chapter begins right here, at the edge of the royal desk, where the ink dries and the dawn enters. Your kingdom awaits the return of its Grand Vizier in the description. Subscribe because the current is good. Share because together is better. Stay luminous, stay true. Magnetic You.